Well, we start with something that is very easy to understand. We start with the idea that there is an interconnectedness in consciousness between all sentient beings, especially as human beings. And God, or a non-local consciousness, as we call it more objectively, is that interconnectedness. This is the easiest thing to remember. But if the tendency develops that the interconnectedness is within space, then avoid that tendency. It is an interconnectedness that transcends space and time. It's a transcendental interconnectedness, which we in quantum physics call non-local, a signal-less interconnectedness that does not require any signals, energy-carrying signal through space and time for communication. So this is the most important and most visual aspect of the new definition of God that is coming out of quantum physics. But even more evocatively, in quantum physics, we look at objects as quantum possibilities, and a little bit of thinking shows us that these are quantum possibilities within this non-local consciousness for consciousness to choose from. So in this way, we have been looking for God's causation, causal power for a long time. How is it exactly that God influences the world? Now we know that how that influence occurs is through this downward causation. The choice from quantum possibilities. It is God that chooses the actual event of experience from quantum possibilities. You were asking, in other words, a modern version of Tibetan Book of the Dead,
yes,
which takes us through these bardos of life and bardos of death, gateways,
yes,
passageways. Yeah, surprisingly, quantum physics helps us to construct such a picture. So, at birth, but birth here is a little bit tricky, because what happens with the fetus? Now, the embryo that we are born as, that is just a single cell birth. So single cells don't carry much of what is in the previous incarnations. So there is not much ongoing continuity as of yet. But as these single cells form multiple cells and progresses a few more weeks, and the fetus starts forming with organs, gradually the vital components of the soul starts manifesting, starts being represented. The mental components of the soul do not manifest until probably the 14th or 16th week with the formation of the brain. At that point only, you can really say that the soul has started, the soul that is continuing through birth, death, rebirth cycle. That soul has fully manifested in this fetus. And that can be understood, because until the 4th month, even the brain doesn't even develop.
Yes.
And until the 6th month, really, the full-fledged developmental process of what we call a human being, a human species, a definite representative of human species, that doesn't show up until about the 6th month. So I think that is very good verification of that's when really we can say the human life begins.
Yes.
Life begins, no doubt. The single cell is also alive, and certainly life begins there, but it's not, the soul has not entered, we might say. Whereas souls begin entering at a bit later, maybe 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever we say, gradually. Some of the morphogenetic fields that are involved in the vital part of the soul, that takes place in a few weeks, going to all the way to 14th week, 16th week, when even the mental part starts coming in. But a full-fledged, complete soul can be said to manifest only about 6 months. Yeah, I think that's a good number to think of.
Then what happens in the actual birth process from there?
So the actual birth process is indeed, there is, in fact, many people like Steingraf talk about the birth canal experience as a traumatic change. And yes, there is good reason to think that it is a traumatic change, because the first birth is taking place in the uterus. So it is a very different environment than when again going to the birth canal and having birth in air, which is separate from mother's womb. That is a very, very difficult process that the fetus goes through. But of course, these
with
processes...
the first breath, for example, once you've made your appearance into the world and the first breath happens, what's happening with that non-local aspect of self?
I think the first breath is very interesting from the non-local point of view, because here was the fetus where there was no division with the consciousness of the mother. It was definitely, both of them lived literally in a symbiosis of one life, in two lives in one life. And all of a sudden, that connection is severed. So again, life begins very justifiably with that first breath. That is also completely justified because that's when individual life, separate from the mother, begins. So we are not wrong in saying that that is the birth time, the birth rate. Astrologically, that is very significant, and all that is correct, because that indeed is the beginning of the individual journey of the soul. This is very interesting, because what happens is definitely, if we watch child development, one thing is very clear. No child is born, or hardly any child. There has differences here. But majority of children certainly are not born as what is called tabula rasa. It's not an empty slate. It certainly can be a very full slate in some cases, like Mozart, but is at least substantially full for most children that grow up. So very quickly they have abilities that would take years if they would be learning from scratch to develop. So that itself shows that there must be propensities that are being reincarnated. In fact, that is one of the best evidence of reincarnation, that we come with propensities that were not learned, could not have been learned in this life. People show propensities all the time where there was no such learning process that went in this life. But nevertheless, they had that capacity. Where did it come from? So it must have come from past life. Because some people, of course, suggest that genes cause everything, but that is such a preposterous notion that we don't even need to go very much into it. Genes are basically instruction for making proteins. They are not even responsible for building forms in the form of organs. And what is very interesting is that that burden is avoided when we reincarnate with a trick that has been verified by some of the data, by some of the past life regression therapists. So the idea is that we develop propensities. So as we develop propensities, patterns of habit can become quite heavy. We become conditioned. We become conditioned in a way that is supportive sometimes for creative work, but sometimes also quite destructive of the creative tendencies. For example, contradictory tendencies, contradictory belief systems. If we are too knowledgeable, it's bound to happen, because we do not always develop in any coherent fashion, especially in the spiritual directions. We have all kinds of beliefs that are not always compatible. For example, I may have a belief that outer creativity is good for me. Outer creativity meaning creativity in the world, or creativity where there is a definite product. At the same time, I am attracted to the idea that, well, we should be spending time peacefully with ourselves and not engaging with the outer world. These two beliefs can often be contradictory. What is happening now is that with a full understanding of spirituality, we find that spirituality consists of both directions. So this incompatibility, which has plagued spiritual people for millennia, is finally going away. Now what we find is that there are two directions of spirituality, and both are important, both are complementary. One is personal. We reincarnate from one life to another to enrich the personal repertoire of expertise and knowledge and understanding. That is one direction of evolution. But there is also a social direction of evolution, which is evolution itself. We evolve as a society, as a species, and human beings are still evolving in the mental direction. Mm-hmm. Although the biological evolution of the human being is complete with the brain, but better and better representations of the mind can be made in the brain, and this is the direction of future evolution. So what has happened is that we now understand that both kind of belief systems are important. So, but it happens, there are many other contradictions in our growing up, and that causes the problem of burden. It becomes a burden because they become a barrier to further our creativity. So how to keep it away? It's very nice that when we reincarnate, you know, we don't bring all of our propensities from past life. We bring only a portion of them.
Our soul and soul purpose, a conscious video directory, is to provoke logical, critical thinking, and to spread informative conscious awareness to all of humanity. We at CVD do not subscribe to any monetary system because our thinking has evolved past the patriarchal, 19th century dominant, masculine mentality. We see today's monetary systems as the key reason why the world is in the chaotic, disillusioned state that it is in. We also feel that the misunderstandings of all religions are the second key reason as to why our world is so dark, confused, and cruel. Conscious Video Directory is here to change, to bring unity, to create harmony, to give true, unconditional love to all humanity. We are here to move on, to evolve, to become one. Please visit us at www.cvd.futureproducer.net and re-educate yourself today.